The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, coming to... Oh. We don't have any sound. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I guess we do have sound. All right. Hey, yeah, it's me. It's Wednesday night, July 24th, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, 11 a.m. in Singapore, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Sydney, Australia, and here I am sitting in northeast Minneapolis. It's 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 140, if I'm correct. And I say if I'm correct because I couldn't check, because not only are we not connected to Blog Talk Radio tonight, their entire website seems to be down. The whole thing. Usually it's like it's just our connection, you know. But no, their website is down, so we can't connect at all. So anyway, we're not on Blog Talk Radio this evening, which is unfortunate because of what we got coming up in the next few minutes. So, yeah, hi everybody, how you doing? So I've had an interesting day today. I bet you have too. We have our guest tonight is Ashton Forbes. Ashton is a YouTube self-appointed investigator on the disappearance of Malaysia Flight 370 in March of 2014. It's been 10 years, and you're wondering, what is there to know? Well, first of all, nobody knows anything. I mean, this plane disappeared without a trace. They have supposedly found a few pieces of it in the Indian Ocean, supposedly. But like he brings up in the interview, which we did this afternoon, you just can't, you don't crash a plane like that and not find anything. You know, they found a couple little pieces. That was it. And what he's got to say is basically absolutely explosive. Now, he's been on numerous different podcasts and internet television shows and all sorts of stuff. Like he has mentioned toward the end of the interview, no one in the mainstream media has taken interest in what he's talking about, even though it's obvious people in the government have. So it's very, very bizarre. So I've had people on the show in the past who basically have what you call fantastical claims or stories. Bruce Solheim comes to mind. He's written a bunch of books. He's a college professor. He says he's been abducted by aliens. He also says he's had a running conversation with one particular extraterrestrial his entire life. Now, I can tell you that, and he sounds crazy. But like a friend of mine who watched that show, and that's been one of our more watched shows, too, I should say that. A friend of mine who watched that show who doesn't buy any of this stuff at all, he says to me, I watched your show last night. I can't not believe that guy. He's just so damn credible and so damn intelligent. And I think you'll find the same thing about Ashton, too. I mean, the claims that Ashton's making about how this plane disappeared, and they regard real high-end science. As a matter of fact, my fear here is that you're going to listen to the interview and kind of get lost in the scientific aspect of it. It involves quantum physics and all sorts of stuff. But what he's saying, and I kind of plugged into this world, as you might know, when we do talk about this stuff regularly here. What he says here is maybe fantastical and maybe somewhat far-fetched, but it's far from impossible. I got to tell you that. It's like, the stuff he's talking about, we know theoretically exists. The only real question is how far have humans come to actually doing this stuff. So This interview is 90 minutes long. It's going to be our entire show tonight. We're not going to have a part 3 or even a closing at the end. When this interview is done, the show's over. So I got to tell you, I don't mean permanently. I mean just for this evening. And because of that, we're also not taking any phone calls tonight. And besides, Blog Talk Radio's down anyway. Just my luck. I mean, they've been having problems over there. I don't know what's going on, but they have been having a lot of problems. So, yeah. So we got that. Now tomorrow night, I got to preference this too. Tomorrow night. So what happened in the news today? There's two major things. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, gave a speech before Congress, which apparently was, if you're at least pro-Israeli or not anti-Israeli, was extremely well received. That's the general crux of it. And secondly, the president gave a speech to the nation from the Oval Office about 3 hours ago now. And we're going to talk about both of those things tomorrow, because our guest tomorrow night, and that will be live, our live guest at 11:30 Eastern will be Jonathan Tobin. He is the executive editor of the Jewish News Service of the United States. So he's going to be on, and this was like Hugh Grant showing up on Jay Leno. This is entirely by chance that we had him booked for this. We had no idea that Netanyahu was coming to the United States. None of this. So he's coming on tomorrow night. We will talk about what Netanyahu talked about, and we'll talk about the president's speech of this evening. It was 15 minutes long. I heard it in the car on the radio. My first reaction is that the president did not sound good, and apparently that's what other people said too. He didn't sound good. I'm listening to Joe Pags afterwards, and Pags said he looked frail. He didn't look good either. I haven't seen it. Like I said, I haven't seen it. I'm only talking about hearing it. And amazingly, he talked for 15 minutes and basically said nothing. Everyone was assuming he was going to tell us why he got out of the presidential race. He didn't. His only rationale or explanation was he's decided to turn it over to the next generation. Well, yeah, okay. And then there's a whole bunch of lies about what he's accomplished. And like I said this is not partisan stuff. He blatantly lies about all this shit. I mean, these are hard, cold facts that he lies about, like inflation numbers, employment claims, all this stuff. I don't think he's deliberately lying. I think he believes all this stuff is true. I think he's delusional. And I don't think it's because this is all his aides are telling him either. I think the mind, and I don't know if it's because his mind is gone. I don't know. But I think he believes all this shit. So, yeah, he doesn't sound good. I talked about last night about the fact there was a rumor going around that he did not have COVID in Las Vegas. He had a mini stroke. And yesterday afternoon, the people, our friends at Red State, they ran an article on that has not been mentioned anywhere else in the mainstream media, but they said they pretty much confirmed it with the members of the Los Angeles police. So Jennifer Van Laar, she's the editor over there. Now, I don't know her personally, but we have Jennifer Oliver O'Connell, and we know other people at Red State and Salem Media too. So they waited quite a while before they published that. So I'm assuming they waited to make absolutely certain they could confirm it. Anyway, we're not talking about that stuff tonight, even though I've talked about it just now. So we're going to wait till tomorrow to talk about that stuff. I'm really looking forward to talking to Jonathan Tobin. That should be fascinating, because I have to tell you, folks, we are, people talking about being on the verge of World War III. We're way closer than anybody knows. First of all, even the Biden White House, the Biden administration has admitted, the last Anthony Blinken talked about it, which is about a week ago or 2 weeks ago. He said that Iran was at that time was 2 to 3 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. Now, there's a guy named Mike who calls in here from Singapore. By the way, I want to thank everybody who called in last night. It was the most calls we've ever had on any show. I was going to do a 40-minute show because I wasn't feeling too hot, and we ended up doing a whole 2 hours because so many people called in. It was actually really cool. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. But Mike, he's an Iranian reporter who lives in Singapore. he said what I've always thought, and that is if the Biden administration says they're 2 to 3 weeks away from nuclear weapon, that means you've already got one. Matter of fact, he thinks they should have 100 by October. And will then can they keep themselves from using it? I don't know. Or using them? I really don't have no idea. They hate Israel's guts, and 1 or 2 nuclear weapons would probably destroy the whole country. I mean, geographically, it's minuscule. So I don't know. The world is in a much more precarious position than people think it is. So I want to talk to Jonathan Tobin about that too. I'm assuming they're on the inside of all that stuff, that they know all this stuff. It is astonishing what legitimate reporters and journalists know that they never talk about because they're never able to confirm it. And this entire show is about speculation. So what the hell? Speculate. I just want to remind you folks, this is not a news program. This is about my commentary and the commentary of the guests and the commentary of the callers, which last night was really cool. We had a lot of people, not a lot, but still a lot for us, who called in. I mean, we had basically took calls for the entire 2 hours. Jeff Meyer, the CEO of Conk News, called from Paris, of all places. That was pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow night, and I really urge you to stick around and watch this entire interview we're going to have with Ashton in a few minutes here. This is really compelling stuff. And, the thing is, and he brings this up, nobody's talking about this stuff. And I know some of the stuff he's talking about, I know is also true. I know that because I've heard it a zillion times from people in the military and people at the Pentagon and all this stuff. So anyway, that's going to come up in just a second. And speaking of Jeff Meyer and Conk News, this is the front page of Conk News this very moment. And I just want to point out that you can just barely see it. It's at the bottom of the page here. And I think this is National Review. I looked at this before we started here. I think that headline says Biden still hasn't explained why he dropped out of the race. And that's true. He didn't. In this 15-minute address, he did not explain why he quit. So I mean, Joe Paggs mentioned this, and it's true. If Biden just said, "I've decided my health is no longer up to a second term," all would be forgiven. That's the thing. It's not just that if that's an explanation, it would explain everything in one sentence, and it would be plausible. I mean, you look at the guy, he's 81 years old, he's going on 100. He looks terrible, especially, I mean, that's even one of the reasons I think the story about him having this stroke in Las Vegas is legitimate. He has looked like crap ever since. First of all, he was not around at all for 6 days. Then the first time we saw him was getting in and on and off of Air Force One, and he looked terrible. He could barely walk. And he's doing this report. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet. These are still pictures. That's a still picture in the upper left corner there on Conk News from his address. And the man does not look well. And if he said that I cannot. I think the reason he won't, I'm guessing, is because people would demand that he step down, and people already are. There's already the thing, and it's really true. If you don't have the health to run for a second term, you probably don't have the health to be president right now, and that's probably true. Anyway, he did say in the address he's going to fill out the last 6 months of his term. He said he's going to do that. So, what is Conk News? Conk News is a news aggregator. Like I said, we're looking at it right here. By the way, that's the reason my picture is in the top right corner, is because they sponsor the show. Very nice of them. And also, I used to work here. I was the editor-in-chief of this publication for 4 years. Very proud of it. It's the single best news aggregator on the internet, and I'm not kidding. It is. You have to check it out at conk.com, conk.com. And you can check it out because it's completely free. You don't have to register. You don't have to log in. You don't have to subscribe. Just go there. The news changes every 3 hours. Every 3 hours, their servers go out to 75 different news sources and grab all the newest stories, and they lay them out on the front page here. This is all done by computers, by servers. They lay them out with the newest stories at the top of the page, the newest at the top of the page. So if you go there like at 10 a.m., typical weekday, There's enough here to read. You even if you only click through stories, you can keep yourself. There's 2-3 hours of stories here. And the thing is, these pictures you see at the top here, and they're all the entire front page is filled with them. They're the pictures from the stories, and the headlines are from the stories directly. They're not rewritten at all. They're from the stories. And when you click through, you don't go to an interstitial ad page. You don't go to their homepage or none of that shit. You go directly to that article. So it's no hanky panky involved at all. This is completely free. Also, the other thing is all the sources they use at Conk News, you do not have to subscribe to read. So all these articles are available to you. You don't have to subscribe to anything. So you can't find a better news source than this. So anyway, like I said, every 3 hours they change. You can go back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 hours later. 80% of the stories are all new, and the old ones are pushed to the bottom. So when you get to the bottom of the page, you'll know that you've seen it before. So if you're a news junkie, you can't do better than this. I use this constantly to plan the shows here. There's nothing better. So that's conk.com. Sorry, CONK.com. Conk News. Check that out. Yeah. So we're going to play our interview with Ashton Forbes, and I won't be coming back after the interview. This interview is 90 minutes long. So, but really seriously, watch this because we talked to a few interesting people here. I don't know if there's anyone I've ever talked to much more interesting than Ashton Forbes. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So anyway, here we go. Joining us from his home in St. Paul, Minnesota, which I did not know, Ashton Forbes. Hi, Ashton. Nice to see
Jim.
you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're in Minneapolis. I didn't know you were in the Twin Cities Metro. I didn't know that. So
yeah. I moved back here. This is my childhood home, so it's nice to be back. I think that the Midwest has some cool people, really nice people, and it's kind of like where my heart's at, I guess.
Yeah, and so far we haven't fucked everything up yet.
We're trying, I think.
I know.
We're trying to fix it too.
That's right. We are trying, but so far so good. Yeah. Hey, very quickly, give us a bit of background about yourself before we start here.
Yeah. So, my name's Ashton Forbes. My career has been in healthcare IT ever since I graduated college. That's been really one of my focuses for almost 20 years. I'm 41 years old at this point, and I've always been. I call myself a database architect. I've always been interested in technology, science, etc. I was a business major, and I got into this healthcare IT business out of college because my resident advisor, when I was a freshman, ended up going to this company, and I kind of followed because she was one of those career advisor people that would come onto campuses when I was a senior. And I've loved the job because all I've ever wanted to do in my whole life is just help people out. And moving hospitals back 20 years ago from paper to computer systems was like a real strong way to help people out.
Yeah.
And nowadays there's not very much of that. Most hospitals are electronic, but there's a lot of like upgrading people, adding new functionality to their systems, optimizing their systems, etc. So I'm very familiar with databases, how to update them, optimize them. I would consider myself probably one of the world's leading experts in the software that I work on.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So how did you get into this whole thing with Malaysia 370? How did you get into this?
I guess it started because I got interested in UFO videos and the science around UFOs around 2017, 2018.
That's our wheelhouse here, right? I don't even know that.
Is
it? That's what we, yeah. Yes, it is. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I didn't ever really pay too much attention to it. I just kind of thought it was just like stories and stuff like that until those DoD Navy videos got published and were kind of talked about in the New York Times. And I started, okay, well, that's interesting. Like there's something here. I looked at those videos. I've looked at them a lot, the gimbal, the go fast. I forget the third one's name, but they're really odd. People have tried to debunk them and what have you. And to me, there's something going on there. I don't know what exactly. It shows some kind of anomalous propulsion that we're not really aware of at the moment. I don't think it's balloons. And so I started just kind of lurking, watching videos. I've seen thousands of videos of lights moving around in the sky and stuff like that. But around August, early August last year, almost the 1 year anniversary of the MH370 videos reemerging, we'll call it. I saw them on the subreddit UFOs on Reddit. I'm no fan of Reddit. I just want to make sure that that disclaimer's out there. People know that I hate Reddit,
That's
but
good. Oh, by the way, I
good.
have to ask you quickly,
Yeah.
since you brought this up. My impression is that the two videos that we're going to play were posted somewhere online like 4 days after Malaysia 370 disappeared. Is that true?
Yeah, so the videos reemerged back in August, but they had been posted on the internet periodically. I would say probably every like 6 months or so. I mean, we didn't really look back at all the incidents, but when we started to go figure out like where did these come from and where did they
Yeah.
originate, the oldest account that we found was Regicide Anon, which is this old YouTube account that's been since deleted. And in the satellite video, one of the videos says satellite video, airliner, and UFOs is the name. In the description, it says received March 12th, 2014, which is 4 days after MH370 disappeared.
Right.
And this video was published May 19th, 2014, which is about 70 days after the plane disappeared. So we have this window of, okay, 4 days to 72 days after the plane disappeared. Unless you believe that Regicide Anon was somehow involved in the hoaxing of these videos, it's hard to understand why they would put received March 12th, 2014, unless that's when they really received a video.
Right.
So these videos reemerged on Reddit. I saw them, and this was the first time in my whole life when I went, holy shit, this is weird. Like these videos that we're going to show here, there's too much detail in them. There's so much little details that you would never see in a hoax video. And I just thought, if these videos are authentic, we should be able to confirm them being real based on the background of whatever happened to this plane. And I remember the plane disappearing and remember thinking, the United States has to know more about what happened to this plane. There's no way it just disappeared. We found nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And so I started researching. Actually, in fact, the people on Reddit started researching for like 2 weeks straight, from like August 7th to around August 19th on the UFOs subreddit, which is a big subreddit of millions of people. Almost every single post was about these videos. And people were analyzing them. People were coming out of the woodwork to say that they were like lead VFX artists of Top Gun Maverick. Somebody else came out and said that they were like somebody who had satellite expertise on working with the government and working with commercial satellites, and that what we were seeing here from a resolution perspective was consistent with probably like Black Project satellite program. And I went, wow, okay, there's too much. Like this is, I was convinced when we got to a point where we could tell the satellite video was a Citrix session. So for people who don't know what that means, that's a remote terminal session. Like when I'm logged into your computer.
It's similar to a Zoom meeting, right? Am I right about that?
Not really. I mean, it's the same concept, but the idea is that like when you log into your computer on like a big company, you're logging into databases that are remotely hosted somewhere else.
Okay.
And so you would imagine that a satellite program, same idea, right? That satellite programs, they're going to be housed on some database farm in like Utah or something. Like they're just making something up. And so you're not actually, it's not on, the satellite data is not on your computer. So you have to log into it. And the satellite video is 6 frames per second, which makes sense if you have this very large field of view that's like a computer generated field of view that's pulling data from satellites everywhere. But the kicker is the mouse, the cursor that comes across the screen that we see is 24 frames per second. So why the discrepancy? Why is the background different than the cursor going in front of it? That's because the cursor is consistent with the Citrix session with the remote terminal when you're logged into the actual days, and they're cropping the screen in this video. And that was when I went, oh crap, because nobody on Reddit had realized that. I mean, people probably realized it, but they didn't post about it, that we weren't looking at a video of a camera like this. Like if I had my camera looking at my screen, you're going to see the screen and what have you. And a lot of leaked UFO videos, you would see like they would look like someone's filming the computer.
Right.
In this case, it wasn't somebody filming the computer. It was somebody doing a screen recording on the computer, and they had cropped down the field of view down. And we know that because we can see the mouse come in from the top right. This, I guess, is the top right, and go off the screen to the bottom left, which meant we're looking at a much bigger field of view, or at least the person is. And in fact, something that we realized recently is that The mouse comes from the top right, which I guess will be over here for you guys, like just where my hand's off the screen, and it comes onto the screen like this. And when the video gets turned off, the mouse goes back off the screen into the same location where it came from, which would indicate that up here somewhere off the screen, there is a press stop recording, start recording, stop recording button.
Right.
Press in there as well, which to me, there's been no hoax videos that ever do anything like this. When you see a hoax video, it's like, here's this UFO and you're like looking at it, it's perfectly centered in the frame and what have you. And so honestly, where we're at right now, like the more I've dug into these videos, I couldn't be more sure that they're authentic. At this point, I'm sure that we are hiding gravity technology from the world, gravity manipulation technology. That's from talking to engineers, scientists, some of which work for the government or as contractors. It's from my own research, reading. I've read dozens and dozens of scientific papers at this point, including the papers they call the DIRDs, the Defense Intelligence Agency research documents. And then also the case of the missing plane. I would have never imagined that we would dig up so much corroborating evidence for not just a conspiracy over hiding what happened to this plane, but for what we're seeing in the videos. We can see smoke coming out of the back of the plane in both videos that are in perfect synchronization from two completely different angles.
Right.
And so
that's the thing that's the thing that impressed me. I have a lot of experience in video production. It would be, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible to fake those videos, but it would be very difficult. And also, then you get to the thing about the fact it would be time and or money consuming, and no one's going to spend a lot of money and stuff like that without any sort of return for it. You know, and
exactly.
these videos
or recognition.
Right.
And nobody's copyright strike these videos. I uploaded the videos on my own YouTube channel. I was like, I'm going to see if they copyright strike me. And I didn't say anything about it because I wanted to see, you know, never been copyright striked. I've been copyright striked by other people in under like 12 hours for uploading stuff, you know? So it's like, who is this mythical hoaxer? And this is the thing that debunkers claim, oh, well, there's this VFX asset that is similar, but not exactly the same. And somebody just modified it.
Excuse me. What does VFX stand for?
Visual effects. So there's two major debunks of the videos that have been promoted that people claim is proof the videos must be fake, and they claim that they don't have to figure out who the hoaxer is or answer any questions for why the videos are perfectly in sync with real evidence related to the plane disappearing. And one of them is a VFX, an explosion effect. And this explosion effect we found was planted on the internet January 25th, 2023, which was about 8 months before the videos got popular. And that effect has been around. So people claim, oh, well, the effect has been around, but it was literally uploaded on like a Wayback Machine location, Internet Archive location, with the sole intent of you being used in the future to debunk the videos.
Yeah.
And we know that because it appeared on the internet 8 months before the videos showed up and got popular, but it appeared around the same time that the videos had been uploaded on Reddit back in January of 2023, where that didn't get much attention, where all the commenters were saying, this is so offensive to the families, blah, 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 like making sure that nobody would ever look at it. But the real kicker was we noticed, I think I noticed it back in March, that the person who uploaded it, they have this like image that shows all the different effects that are in this package. And they messed up. And what they did was they copy and pasted the real drone zap, this endothermic event, into the collage of the images. And I went,
shit.
That's the drone thing. That's not from this asset. And I looked at it, I'm like, why would they do that?
Oh, I'll tell you why they would do it. Because the thing is, I've been doing this shit for a long time. That's a very sort of thing the government would do. And post it in the Wayback Machine so that it looked like it was old. And that's the very type of thing those guys do. I mean,
because they wanted the debunkers to find it. And
that's
then they
right.
Go, here,
exactly.
You find this. And then the debunkers say, oh, no, this is where it came from, right? And so when I saw that, this was the craziest thing. I caught that. I went, whoa, that's the drone thing in the collage of the asset. They were trying to make people think that this was part of the assets.
Right.
The next day, I go back to it. They removed it.
No shit.
It was out of the collage. Under 24 hours. I caught them red-handed removing it. And we found out that it can be modified, but because it's not technically the Wayback Machine, it's like this Internet Archive upload page, which confused me at first. But we found out only the person that uploaded it could change that. So that meant that Wave Rider 3000, the person that uploaded this, was watching extremely closely, saw me catch them with putting the drone zap in there, and then was like, oh shit, I got to remove that, because
Yeah.
it showed malintent. It showed
Right.
that their intention was to use this to debunk the videos.
Right.
And this is just what's so wild about it, is like, this is like a movie playing out now, right? Like the drama associated with these videos. Because if these videos are real, this is the biggest conspiracy ever. Like, disappearing a Boeing 777 is already right near the top of the biggest conspiracies ever. But if you're also hiding gravity manipulation technology, and by the way, there's a link between gravity manipulation technology and free energy. If you're hiding free energy from the world, and this is why you're covering up the videos, the least they would do is plant some VFX, I think, similar VFX on the internet to say like, oh, here you go, try to debunk or use this to debunk the videos.
Ashton, are you familiar with Richard Dolan? Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he has propagated that, and I buy this too, that there's a small cadre of people in either the military or the military industrial complex, however you want to figure it, maybe 500 to 2,000 people that are essentially living 100 years ahead of us. And I think he's absolutely right.
He is right.
And you're absolutely right about the fact that, and that's his thing too, and it's criminal. It's okay for the government to keep their military secrets. Everyone expects that. But if you're hiding, basically free energy from the public or from the world, something that could solve a huge worldwide problem, and you're basically keeping it to yourself, yeah, he says that's criminal, and I agree with him.
Yeah, and no, he's 100% right on that front. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the devices, and in fact, a lot of the stuff people say, like, why don't you open source the device? I said, people have open sourced it. Like, there's videos out there that I think are real over Unity devices that show coefficient of performance greater than 1. They get ignored, they get discredited. People are just brainwashed to think that whatever we know scientifically publicly is all that there is,
right?
And that nothing else beyond that's possible. A lot of people just yell at me like, you can't violate the second law of thermodynamics. I got newsflash for you. We can violate it. And the science around 0 point energy, and the idea that, instead of thinking of space as like zero energy down here, you want to think of space as like this energy. It's like there's this latent underlying energy, and if we reduce it below that, now that's negative energy, and then here's positive energy. And if you look at space like that, now we can have this advanced technology. Now we can bend space-time. We can polarize the vacuum, as we would say. We can have 0 point energy. I think that Richard Dolan's right on the money. If I were to guesstimate the number of people, I would say probably a few hundred to a few thousand people. It's not a lot of people. I mean, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and a very small percentage of them know. And I know for a fact that some of them are buying stuff like free energy devices and things like that. I know for sure too that like gravity manipulation technology is possible. And it's such a mind trip when you go down it, because to me, that's the scarier part. The suppression of it is the scarier part than just being able to even steal plane or the science existing. Is like, how the hell are they hiding this? Oh, well, because most people are just sheep on this planet. Like, there's literally a breakaway civilization level of people, and they control the perception of everything that goes on. And everybody just is an automaton, like a robot, just living out their lives,
Right.
And so as somebody that came into this, as someone who I didn't think any of this stuff would have been possible. Like a year ago, honestly, a year ago this time, I would have thought this can't be real. Like, that can't be possible. That's what's been the biggest kind of mind trip for me.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 5 years, not just show, but like involved in news. And yeah, nothing amazes me more than the shit I found out that turned out to be true. It's unbelievable. I tell you what, let's play the video.
Sure.
Or actually, what I have here is the two videos you have side by side synced together.
Okay.
And that's actually really important here too. They are synced together.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Yeah, I mean, right away you can see this drone too. Like, this is an MQ1 variant. We think it's an MQ1C Gray Eagle because we found pictures on Google that show cameras underneath the wings, because they have this like loadout where you can like customize it and you can change it. But theoretically, it could be some other drones because they have the same body shape. So we can't really tell. We can see smoke coming out of the back of the plane in both videos. We see these orbs come in. Now the orbs this is wild because remember these videos were 2014. Orbs were not in the zeitgeist until last few years. Really, is when they started to get popular. And one of the things that I noticed right away, and I would say that if anything, if I have any like special powers, it's like intuition on this. This is why like Navy engineer Salvatore Paez wanted to talk to me. Look at the heat signatures on those orbs in the video on the left. You can see this heat signature in there. It's like a little, almost like half circle type shape in there. We're looking at a field here. This is not like a solid metal ball. This is some kind of field of plasma, if I were to call it anything. Turns out like the secret to this science is plasma science, cold fusion. And cold fusion, I think, is a form of overunity, a form of free energy. If you want to replay it again, just for our viewers as well.
I will replay it.
Yeah. So, you know, especially when you watch the movement of these orbs, I want people to notice, especially in the video on the right, when the first orb comes flying in, it's some kind of homing mechanism going on because it doesn't lock in right away. It circles around the plane on our left when we're looking down. It misses and then it gets around it. Now, the second and third orbs, as they come in, instantly get into formation. And not only do they instantly get into formation, but they're in a perfect equilateral triangle formation, which is important because this is a 0-point system. So if you're trying to create some type of singularity, you want a 0-point system so that all your waves are canceling out at the 0 point, which is the center of mass of the plane. And what are they doing? Well, they're measuring the mass of the plane. Why are they measuring the mass of the plane? Because if you look at what negative mass or negative energy is, and you look at how it interacts with normal mass, if normal mass were to hit more normal mass, it's going to slow down after it hits it because acceleration equals force divided by mass. So the more mass you have, the slower it's going to go. So this thing's flying in, hits here and slows down. What happens with negative mass? When positive mass hits a negative mass object, it hits it and it speeds up. So what is the ratio then? So what's happening is, let's say this is 10 kilograms and this is 1 kilogram of negative mass. It's going to speed up a little bit. Now, as the negative mass increases from -1 to -10, once it hits -10, now your equations are going to say positive 10 minus 10 equals 0. So now your acceleration is dividing by 0. And what happens when you divide by 0? You have infinity, basically. So what's infinity in terms of that same thing where you have your mass hitting your object and it's going to speed up? It's going to speed up at infinity acceleration, which is teleportation, essentially. You know, the maximum acceleration possible. It turns out that negative mass, negative energy, and we refer to it as negative mass energy because E equals mc squared, so energy is mass. Negative mass, negative energy is what's required for a wormhole. It's what's required for warp drive. It's basically what's required for gravity manipulation is negative mass, negative energy. And what we're seeing in that event when the plane disappears is this endothermic cold event, this absorption of energy. And so if you, again, you look and you think of physics as, or the universe as having this latent energy levels here. If you have this negative endothermic event, negative energy event, you would be extracting energy from a location. You're going to have that energy appear somewhere else. That's negative energy. So right away, there's a lot of these concepts that are linking together. The exact thing we need for a wormhole appears to be what we're seeing in these videos. And that's why what I think is happening in that video is teleportation. Now, theoretically, I guess it could be annihilation if you have antimatter or what have you, but if it was a normal explosion, we should be seeing like the planet blow up. That's a Boeing 777. That's a lot of
right. Right.
So instead, I think what's happening is that energy is moving from one location to the other instantly. And I don't think this is going to another planet or another dimension. It's going somewhere else on Earth. Because I think that's our technology we see there. I don't know if maybe we reverse engineered it. I know you know about UFOs, and I started looking back through it, and I think this technology and science goes back to the Manhattan Project, personally. So I think it is possible that we've figured this out, but I don't know that that means like we figured it out from ourselves or if we, you know, had some help along the way. I'm not really sure. The more I look into it, the less sure I am, honestly.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. My personal speculation is that we've got the stuff from reverse engineered extraterrestrial aircraft. That's what I personally think. But
Yeah.
just my theory too about the stuff that the gimbal videos and all the stuff the U.S. Navy's reported. And I want to point out, but people who watch the show know this. This is entirely my personal speculation. I have no real evidence of this at all. I think that most of those things are actually ours, but the reason they're flying them around is because we got the technology from reverse engineering crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. That's what I think.
That's generally what I think too, actually. So I think that what we're looking at there is ours. I think that maybe we figured it out because we watched it. Like the easiest way to learn something, like I'm a person who learns by doing, is you learn by watching. I mean, I've basically been able to reverse engineer the science of those videos over the last 9 months. And I had no background whatsoever in engineering, at least not from a college perspective. I told you I was a business major in healthcare IT. And I've spent almost every single night reading scientific papers that are related to wormholes, warp drive, negative energy, et cetera, that are out there. I see the same names over and over and over again. I spoke to Salvatore Paez, who you're probably familiar with his UFO patents. Inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft, piezoelectric induced high temperature superconductivity, and high frequency gravitational waves. Well, he's not the only one. I can already tell if you look at his references.
Hey, can I ask you something? So you've spoken to him. Now, was he working for the military when he filed those patents?
Yep. So
and how come they weren't filed
in the Navy?
Were they filed on behalf of the military or just personally?
And if you look them up, they're filed on behalf, like the organization is the Navy when you look them up, and he filed them. And the big question is, how was he able to get them patented publicly without, being hidden? What I've heard from my sources is that it was some kind of loophole.
Did you ask him? The military has the ability to secretly patent stuff. Why didn't they use that mechanism? Did you ask?
1951 Invention Secrecy Act.
Yeah.
Well, in order just to even get it to go through the process at all to be approved for it, he must have gotten somebody on the inside wanted the information out. But the way that I think it's being played out is that there's potentially factions behind the scene where some of them want it out, some of them don't. I mean, imagine hiding this for 80 years. At some point, you got to be like, there's got to be people that are like, they want it out. I mean, this is getting crazy, right? Like we're getting to the point where like we're using petroleum and all these fossil fuels when we could be having devices that just produce energy for us sitting right next. We could be hovering around like the Jetsons in Star Trek right now, but instead we're like just ignorant monkeys. It's like
we're burning. Yeah, I have no
psychological aspects. Got to be huge.
Yeah, we're burning dirty oil. I mean, it's like
so Salvatore Paez had to, and also the patent officers. Like people think you can just patent anything. That's not true. Like they will get rejected by the patent officer's office if it's not possible. The biggest thing that they didn't want to approve was because they thought the energy densities that he was talking about, I think it's 10 to the 33 or it's 10 to the 32 was like joules per meter cubed or something like that. These energy densities, they said they weren't possible. The reason why the energy densities are so important is remember this latent energy level. This goes back to Hal Puthoff and zero point energy and probably people before him as well. Where it's like, if you can manipulate the energy density of the universe, of space-time, then you can manipulate gravity. That's what gravity is, potentially, is just manipulating your energy densities up or down. And this is what Sal Paez is saying that we can pull off. Because like, if I just extract energy from one location, now I can increase my energy levels over here as well. I think these orbs have to have some kind of power mechanism. They're not like, where's their energy coming from? They're extracting it from the universe, from space all around them. And the Navy had to jump in because they were going to reject it and say, no, like we can actually do this, because conventional physics and science would say, no, we can't reach these energy densities. They're just high. It's just not possible.
Right.
So that's how they ended up getting approved. And I think the fact that people aren't paying more attention to it, that's the thing that scares me the most too, is it's not like it's just his papers. I found Hal Puthoff. Go look at Hal Puthoff's research paperwork.
I'm familiar with him. Yeah.
He gets discredited because you can tell in his early history, he was looking at a lot of like remote viewing and psychic stuff. But look at his stuff from the 80s and beyond. Then it becomes all about zero point energy, zero point energy as an explanation for gravitation, using this stuff as propulsion. Obviously, somewhere along the lines, he became good friends with Eric Davis. Eric Davis's work is teleportation physics study, stabilizing wormholes 2024. I'm just like, wait, what? And you look at the acknowledgments on these guys' papers. Who are they acknowledging? They're acknowledging the Air Force and the DoD. I'm like, guys, wake up here. Like, it's all just right out there. That's the part that, blew me away. And I think another person that deserves a lot of recognition is Thomas Bearden. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, tragically passed away a couple of years ago. I wish I could have met him. He's talking about cold explosions back in the 80s and scalar interferometry, which is like creating and removing energy at a distance using an interferometry, which is like two beams crossing the streams and Ghostbusters. I mean, when I was listening to him, he even explains 0-point systems and how a 0-point system, and he goes, a 0-point system isn't necessarily just like this. He goes, it's also like this, like a triangle. And I went, holy shit. He's talking about the video, but this is a recording of Thomas Bearden in 1985 when I was 3 years old. And I'm going, holy crap, this guy was, these guys were in black projects with the government.
They were all there. I don't think anybody could discount the fact they were brilliant sons of bitches and still are.
Yeah, so him, and then somebody else that a lot of people don't know about is Bob Baker. The guy's got, like, I don't know, a dozen papers on high frequency gravitational waves. And one of the things that I didn't realize is LIGO, which is this gravitational wave detector that we have, is only able to detect low frequency gravitational waves, which is like stellar objects colliding as we detect these very long wavelength, low frequency gravitational waves. But the gravitational waves that we produce in the labs, because also this is just an open secret, apparently, they were producing high frequency gravitational waves in the labs. They're all high frequency in the labs. So it's like blinding ourselves, or like we can only see some of what's up there. But you imagine if we were detecting high frequency gravitational waves, and if there's other species out there, they're not going to be using low frequency gravitational waves. They're going to be using high frequency gravitational waves to move around. So it's almost like we've sabotaged ourselves to not even be able to see what might be out there. And he says,
was that a limitation of technology, or do you think it was literally they put a governor on it?
Oh, I think that they're definitely sabotaging / suppressing some of this, like CERN as well with the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. This should be able to figure out that like 0-point energy and free energy is possible and real. So I don't know if they're suppressing it, sabotaging it, or what. But between that and LIGO, like, I've become so suspicious of all the publicly facing science at this point, because we should be advancing much further than we are. Like, I was challenging Professor Brian Keating. I think he's a good guy, but I was challenging him, like, where are the discoveries over the last 25 years, right? We've had basically no scientific advancement. And at some point, you've got to say, like, maybe we should look back at history and go, like, did we take a wrong path somewhere? I think the wrong path that we took is something that Terrence Howard was talking about on Joe Rogan, the ether. When I talk about the energy level, 0-point energy, I refer to it as the space-time ether, which is this idea that like our reality is sitting on a fabric, and that this equilibrium energy level that we have out there is the interaction between the space-time and then all the energy that's all around us all the time. And there's so much of that energy, it's just an ocean of energy. And that even if we pull down and take a little bit of energy out of there, it's like taking little teaspoons out of the ocean. It's not doing anything. And the water is going to go back to the ocean through the natural system of the universe in this case. So,
right. Hey, let me ask you: have you? You were talking about like Bierman writing this stuff like in 1983. Have you figured out any sort of timeline of discovery? Because I talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of different opinions on when some of this stuff was discovered or when we figured it out. Or have you put together any sort of rough timeline of the discovery of this stuff?
Yeah, I kind of have, actually. If I had to say when it started, I would say probably the 40s, Manhattan Project. It wouldn't surprise me if we figured it out during the Manhattan Project, and it's like two sides of the same coin, and we just only showed one side: nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, and the rest of it's been suppressed and silenced ever since.
It was a priority at that time, so that would be understandable, right?
And and then I think that my guess is that there's kind of I don't know, between the 40s and like the 2000, like how far we got advanced, but Thomas Bearden in the 80s was talking about scalar physics, scalar interferometry. The way I imagine advancing is you start with radar dishes on the ground that can then create this in the sky. And then where do you go from there? Satellites in the sky that can, now you have a much bigger field of view over the Earth. And then after that, you get to a point where you have little balls of plasma that are self-sustaining, that can float around and they can produce the beams anywhere they want, just like we see in those videos. I think in terms of teleportation, which I think is what I guess, or wormhole, whatever you want to call what we're seeing in that video, early 2000s, based on the scientific papers that I've read, is when the scientific papers on teleportation really start to take off, and the scientific papers on the like wormholes and these things, like Miguel Alcubierre as well in the 90s, you
right.
know.
It's funny you should bring that up, because Alcubierre, so he came up with that, I think, in the 70s or something like that, wasn't it? I mean, I can't remember.
He started publishing in the 90s, I think, but I'm sure
in the 90s
have been around. Yeah.
But like you were saying, his theory, it wasn't so much discounted, but people said, well, we can't do this because we can't marshal the energy to do it. I mean, based on his theory, even to fly a small spacecraft, even to loop it through, you know, for lack of a better term, the ether at faster than the speed of light, it would take more electricity than is generated on the planet. I mean, that was his thing. But, you know, but you're talking about the fact that, yeah, this energy is actually all around us, and if we can marshal that, it wouldn't be that difficult. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, and what you're going to find when you look at the scientific papers around it is that we've figured out how to produce more energy and extract it, like you were just explaining, but also how to reduce the amount of energy is required. So instead of needing this huge amount of energy, you make your shell around your area or your object very, very thin. The thinner you make it, the less energy is required, like a soap bubble. It's like, how much energy does a soap bubble require? It's super thin. It doesn't need to be this huge, dense, thick thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that you can reduce the energy requirements, and you can increase and amplify the amount of energy that we can produce. And that's how this stuff becomes from science fiction to science fact. One of the things I realized recently too was that it was Carl Sagan, when he was writing Contact, that he asked some people to like go and like advance the science around like wormholes, and that's when the science actually came out. So it was almost like, you know, art imitating life at that point as well, where this is how a lot of the ideas that are out there are like real science, like stuff in Star Trek, Star Wars, hyperspace. You know, it's this same kind of idea, is that you have three different methods of propulsion. You have impulse drive, which is what we would refer to as EM drive, which is just the ability to push off of the 0 point energy field, which is, it's cool, but it's very rudimentary. You know, the next step is warp drive, which is, at this point, you're like pulling space around your object.
Right.
And that's what I think we're seeing the orbs do. It can be subluminal, which is slower than the speed of light, although I think it can approach the speed of light as well. But if you want to really cheat, what do is you bend space, and then you just cut through it, you know, like a shortcut, and that's a wormhole. So there's really three different applications of the same science, and all of it has to do with bending space-time, you know. So how do you bend space-time? I think that, as Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis talk about, you manipulate the energy levels of that region of space that you want to manipulate.
I just want to point out to the viewers here the fact that you're talking about legitimate science here. Yeah, this is not bullshit. Science. I know, it's like,
that's what a lot of people don't realize. They don't realize this.
That's the reason I brought that up. A lot of people don't realize this. That's right. This is legitimate science that you're talking about. I mean, this is not pie in the high sky bullshit.
And I'm not making, and like, I didn't invent any of this either. That's the other thing. Like, I posted about this last night because I was just like, it's just like, I've got to just release this information that I've got inside. And so one thing I hate when I would read books, and I love sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that, is how, like, when somebody has some special talent and they're like trying to be taught by their mentor, the mentor's like, you have to figure it out for yourself, blah, blah, blah. I can't help you, you know? I hate those tropes. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to tell you, here's how it is. Like, this is what the science says. You know, this is how wormhole works. This is how you have to view the universe. Some people can understand and accept it. A lot of people can't, because they've just been taught within this box that this is how things must be. So going back to the videos, like, now you can see these videos changed my whole life, because once you see it and you go, oh, this is it. This is the proof that that's the correct view of the universe. This is how we can do that. How could anyone even make this up? So now you got to be a VFX expert that took no money for your work, took no credit for your work. Somehow you know about wormholes and, you know, Alcubierre and this like negative energy and all this. Like, No, but there's no person out there that knows about this. Not to mention, you have to know how our spy satellite surveillance system works and what the
Yeah.
drone videos look like. This is not stuff that people can just make up. Some of these debunkers literally out there and claiming, oh, some student could have made this on their weekend or something. And I'm going, you have no idea the difficulty and the amount of details. We didn't even dig into the warp drive of the orbs. Is that you can see this dark line in front of the orbs, and the orbs are just getting pulled along through it. And it's a perfect sinusoidal pattern as well, perfect wave function that you see. And I'm going, no, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that in sci-fi. There's nothing like that in a movie, TV show, anywhere. So somebody just like some Banksy creative genius just decided to make up this warp drive that nobody's ever seen with these orbs and plasma physics. So let's connect a little bit to the plane situation, because holy crap, is there a lot to connect.
Well, okay, I'll tell you what. Why don't you go back to the actual takeoff of Malaysia 370 from the Kuala Lumpur airport? What happened?
Yeah. Do you want me to share my screen as well? Because I could do that if that helps.
Yeah.
Because I've got this actually pretty nifty video that I think it was Chris from the Not So Deep podcast made. That's actually like a graphical representation here. So you'll be able to see this in just 1 second.
I got to admit, okay, there we go. I got it. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this plane's taken off from Kuala Lumpur, because this really helps visualize it. Because also I want people to realize, like, when this plane disappeared, the whole world had no idea what was going on. Like, we didn't tell where this plane disappeared. This is the story after like months and months and months, where finally it started to get pieced together. Is that this plane goes here. And now this is the part where the plane goes dark. 1721, 40 minutes after takeoff, near the Agari waypoint, plane goes dark.
That's the handoff point for
very close to the handoff plate,
right?
And this was 64 seconds after the pilot, with no discernment, no alarm in his voice, says, "Good night, Malaysian Airlines flight 370."
Right.
Plane goes dark.
Yeah.
It's not even really possible to make a plane go dark like this. There's some YouTube videos that are out there that, frankly, they're all garbage. You shouldn't waste your time watching any of them. Most of them ignore like 80 to 90% of the evidence. And they all promote this completely nonsense myth about the pilot suiciding the plane. It's not supported by any actual evidence. It's mostly just a fabrication of a narrative that people have developed.
Well, also, if you don't mind my stopping you for a second, the thing about all those narratives is that if you were going to kill yourself, that's not the way you do it.
You would just crash the plane right
That's
here.
right.
Right? You would have found a giant debris field right here.
You wouldn't bother with any of this crap. You wouldn't.
No. And this is what Matthias Chang even mentioned. He was this advisor to Prime Minister Mahathir, which was the Malaysian Prime Minister before Najib. So before the guy that was in charge, and the guy who was actually after Najib stepped down. Side note, Najib, the guy who was the Prime Minister of Malaysia when this happened, the next year he was indicted in the largest kleptocracy corruption case in the history of the world, which was 1 MDB. He was caught with $700 million in his bank account. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah. It's probably a little too much. You probably shouldn't get caught with that much.
Probably shouldn't get caught with that much money in your bank account. A little too much. People wonder where that money's coming from. 700 million. And he's the guy that went on TV and said that the plane ended in the South Indian Ocean, where we never found a single piece of the plane, by the way. So that's who you're trusting.
All right.
Now, the real reason why this plane goes dark here is a fire event. And people are going to say, well, Ashton, people say, why are you connecting a fire event? You've got these videos, these orbs disappearing in the plane. Well, we saw smoke coming out of the back of the orbs. So to fast forward a little bit, if you look all the way over here to the west, you see this boat. This is Catherine T's boat. She's got probably the best sighting of the witness of the plane out of anybody out there. Even 10 years later, she's still sticking with her sighting. She's in the agreed upon path of the plane by everybody. That was later confirmed by these satellite pings. All the investigators just like discredited her, said that she must be making it up. There's no way she could see the plane. The reason why? Because she sees a glowing orange plane with smoke coming out of the back of it, flying very low.
So I just want to
why they won't accept. Go ahead.
I just want to get this straight here. The dotted lines, so the plane gets to the handoff point, it doesn't hand off, and then it makes a sharp turn, right?
Yeah, and this turn was a manual turn back. So this means the pilot took control. And this is part of the reason why they think the pilot did it. But what's happening here is this is an emergency event.
Right.
So Mike McKay is on an oil rig somewhere east of this plane. They
Uh-huh.
also discredited him. They tried to claim that he couldn't have seen it because he saw a plane on fire for just a few seconds. So presumably the almost 500 pounds of lithium ion batteries on board this plane, extremely dangerous in the
And
cargo bay.
I got to ask you about that, Ashton. Why do they let commercial passenger planes ship lithium batteries? I find that crazy.
They don't
That's
anymore.
nuts.
How funny is that? They
Oh,
banned it like the next year after this.
interesting.
Several planes
Huh.
burnt up. So there's a lot. This is again like, how is that? How do we find out that they banned them like right after this?
Yeah,
Because they're
and I just
extremely
want to point
dangerous.
out. I want to point out for the viewers that's a verified fact that there were 430 pounds of lithium on this flight.
And we looked on where they were because this investigation has done way more than what people give us credit for. They had 2 pallets of these were in the forward cargo bay, right next to the electronics bay. That's the last spot you want to have these batteries because they
Yeah,
could damage the plane, make the plane go
crazy.
dark, right? That's
Right.
obviously what happened if you look at the facts. Because
Yeah.
now what's the pilot doing? They're turning back around. So Mike McKay sees the plane on fire for a few seconds. The fire extinguishing devices probably kick in automatically. They put the fire out. 10 minutes later, 2 things happen. There's 8 fishermen on a boat 10 miles off the coast here. They see the plane flying unusually low. Well, why is the plane flying low? Because they're trying to depressurize the plane, but they don't want to asphyxiate everybody. They're trying to give people oxygen and be able to breathe.
Right.
Because you've got smoke spewing through the cabin. You've got the fire extinguishing devices are sucking oxygen out of the cabin. So you've got to fly low enough for people to have enough oxygen and be able to breathe.
Right.
And this was corroborated by some of the investigators. I think it was the French investigators that looked at their turn back and they realized that this was an emergency descent as well. So we know this plane that descended. This is the exact opposite thing you would do in a suicidal scenario.
Yes,
Suicidal
right.
scenario that you're locking everybody out or whatever, you're going to fly high in the air so that you knock everybody out instantly because otherwise
Correct.
people are eventually going to get in.
And I want you to confirm this. So the fact that this happened at the handoff point is just sheer chance, right?
So let's talk about that in a second in terms of
Okay.
why.
All right, go ahead.
We'll come back to that. So also real quick, there was another Boeing 777 pilot that was flying, I think either to or from Narita, Japan, which is Tokyo. And they heard communication from the pilot around the same time these people saw the plane flying low, these fishermen, which would indicate that there might be communications, maybe communication that wasn't really the last communication that they claimed, that they've been hiding in some other communications. Now, why would they hide the communications? Because it's an emergency situation. And if you release those communications, everybody's going to know it was an emergency situation. Now, how do we also know it's an emergency situation? Because the Minister of Defense of Malaysia did an interview 7 weeks later. And it's the sketchiest interview I've ever seen in my life. It makes the interviews in the United States with politicians look like normal by comparison. He won't answer a single question. He gets asked why they didn't send up jets. And he goes, well, why? Because we were going to shoot. Why would we shoot it down? And then the lady's like, well, you would just send up jets to track the plane. Like, you can't track it. And he says that they knew it was a commercial airliner, even though it wasn't identified. And they knew it wasn't hostile. How could you know an aircraft that's rogue aircraft is not hostile? You couldn't. The only way you could know is if you have communication with the plane. That's the only way.
Right.
So he basically gives away the game.
Yeah.
They must have had communication with the plane. They must have known it was an emergency event. That's why it's going to Penang. Penang's the closest airport to land a Boeing 777 in an emergency situation. The elevation is more advantageous as well comparing to going back to Kuala Lumpur. Because that's the big question is why do you not go back to Kuala Lumpur? Well, technically Penang's a little bit closer based on where this happened. So now you're starting to realize that maybe the location where it happened was intentional so that you could direct the plane a certain way. Now, here's the real big mystery, which I made a post where I claim to know exactly why it's not landing, but we can't know for sure. We just know this plane didn't land at Penang. It could be the fire event made it so that the landing gear was damaged. They couldn't deploy the landing gear because the power was out. Could be that the plane was overloaded with fuel because it's got 8 hours of fuel and you're only like an hour into your flight here at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a number of reasons why it may not have landed. But then it makes this deviation. Again, if this is a suicidal situation, you're just going straight over Indonesia into the South Indian Ocean.
Right.
You're not going to deviate over here to the Andaman Sea. Because what's going on in the Andaman Sea? The Cobra Gold and Cope Tiger exercises between who? Thailand and the United States. So we've got military exercises that have been going on for a month in this area here. Do you think somehow the United States didn't see a rogue Boeing 777 flying past their highly advanced military exercises? No way.
No.
No chance. So like right away, we know the United States knows more about what happened to this plane. And then so the plane flies over here into the Straits of Malacca, the Andaman Sea, and then these are the Nicobar Islands over here. Now, this is also what's really weird is if you look at when they claim to have lost contact with the plane, if you go look up the old reports from the plane, the day the plane disappeared, you're going to find they say Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane at 1840 UTC. Well, that's interesting because 1840 UTC, where's the plane? Right near where Catherine T's boat is. But instead, they changed it a few days later, and they said their last contact was actually 1822 UTC via Malaysian radar. And then at 1840 UTC, we're basically seeing the plane glowing orange with smoke coming out of the back of it, flying very low. Why is that important? It's consistent with what we saw in those videos. The coordinates in the satellite video, there's coordinates in the bottom left. Down here, bottom left of the satellite video. They indicate right here around where Catherine T's boat is, somewhere around where I've got my mouse over here, just northwest of where this boat is. So wherever we think, if somebody made those videos, then they're trying to indicate that this plane is right where this plane supposedly turns into the South Indian Ocean, because this is the location where the plane supposedly turns into the South Indian Ocean based on the satellite pings. They don't know for sure because, again, it's just pings that ping every hour or something like that, but it's somewhere around this region.
And is that what this dotted line here off to the left of the screen?
Oh, so this dotted line actually indicates where we think the plane is being teleported. So we think Catherine T's sighting says she saw the plane kind of like wrap around her boat a little bit. And this is actually similar to the direction of travel we see in the satellite video as well. And so we think that this plane disappears here. Catherine T's sighting says that she was tracking the plane, watching the plane, and then she was in some kind of fight with her husband. So she went and put the kettle on for some tea. And she ended up coming back out and there was no plane. And all she saw was a glowing orange, like halo type thing in the sky.
So she didn't actually see it disappear. Poof.
I asked her because I talked to her back in October of last year.
Yeah.
At least she told me that she didn't see it. Now, if you're somebody who saw something like that, you probably don't really want to talk about it either, but
that's true.
So
yeah,
she says she didn't see the plane disappear, but she didn't see the plane when she came back out. So we have another post as well that I suppose I can share just because you were asking about this. Because people ask, like, where did the plane go? So we created this map here. If you switch over, or did I share that?
Hold on. Yeah, right here.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, so this is where that comes from. And so we think the plane's going to the west, because if you use the right-hand rule in electrical engineering based on the movement of the orbs in front of the plane, and you use your vector travel, it indicates vector travel backwards. And we can tell the plane is traveling to the east. So if that's the case, then you're going to see this plane going to the west somewhere. Again, the slingshot, right, of our rubber band. Now, we don't know exactly where it shows up because we don't have two videos on the other side. But this is basically an estimate of where we think, based on the vector of the plane going to the east, where it will begin slingshotted back to the west. Why is this important? Because if you look at these words down here, this basically says there's a fire suppression device that washes up in the Maldives, a Boeing 777 fire suppression device, washes up on an island around March 25th, 26th. Gets reported on as a bomb. It's got serial numbers on it. The official investigation and search from Malaysia they don't even include Maldives in the search. And it's also really important because that device had to have been empty in order for it to wash ashore. Otherwise, it would have sank to the bottom of the ocean. So we've got an empty fire suppression device that randomly washes up a couple of weeks after this plane disappears. And 20 islanders on this small island of Kuda Hoduvo here, 20 islanders on a small island of only 3,000 people all see the plane flying south towards Diego Garcia military base. The reason why they get discredited is A, because it tells what really happened to the plane, but B, it was coming from the west. So I talked to people like Florence DeChangi. She's a very, very intelligent journalist and researcher. And she said it couldn't be the plane because it was coming from the west, not from the east. They expected it to be coming from the east. But if this plane gets teleported somewhere over here, now the plane could be coming from the west. And now we realize that those islanders saw the plane. And it should be obvious because when Sergio, I always butcher his last name, like Caduvolo, I think his last name is, he went and talked to the islanders. These people saw the plane. Like, they saw the red and white stripe of Malaysian Airlines. They see the windows of a jumbo jet. The jumbo jets don't fly over this island, you know?
Yeah.
So, and the day that our plane disappears. So it was really a matter of just piecing together the evidence. And then you realize, like, instead of doing what everybody else is doing, which is throwing out all the evidence that they don't like, right? This investigation looked at all the evidence from a fresh new set of eyes and pulled it all back in. The only thing that we had to throw out was the satellite pings after 1840 UTC, which is the time where the day the plane disappeared, they say they lost contact with the plane. And those satellite pings indicate that the plane went from where my mouse is here, where Captain T sees the boat, down into the South Indian Ocean and flies down there for 6 hours. And that it somehow crashes somewhere down near Australia.
Well,
we looked down there and we found nothing, right?
Ashton, forgive me for being a conspiracy theorist, but those pings would be pretty easy to fake, wouldn't they?
Not only would they be pretty easy to fake, they're super easy to fake. And when you look at the pings, they're super, super sketchy. So I decided, okay, I've got to go look at these pings. So let me pull this up for you as well. I was like, I'm a database architect. Let me see what these pings look like. So I find it from Victor Ilanello's blog. And this is the chain of custody, is that the Inmarsat gives it to the Malaysian government, who gives it to a family member, who then gives it to Victor Ilanello, a blogger. That's how we found the raw pings data. And I start scrolling through it. You can see there's these times on the left over here. These are the times where these pings are pinging back and forth. Now, I have another video file that I can show, but there's like, I don't know, 40 pages of pings before this point of this flight. You get down to 1840. And then all of a sudden, 1941, 2041, 2241, 2313, this is 6 hours of data. It's 10 rows. So for the first hour and a half, 2 hours of this flight, you've got 40 pages of data, hundreds and hundreds of rows. And then you get down here.
Was it pings about every 6 minutes?
The pings are kind of sporadic. It's not like every hour. It's like every few minutes or so. There's like more pings.
Right.
And then down here, it's all once per hour. And this is when they claim the plane's flying in the South Indian Ocean all of a sudden. And so I start talking to some of these experts that claim that the pings are like, it can't possibly be fake. These pings have never been corroborated by anybody. Now, when people say they corroborate, what they mean is they looked at the pings and they decided they're legit, as opposed to like another company saying, yes, we also pinged this plane and here's the corroboration of it. These pings have not been corroborated. They didn't release this data until May 27th, 2014. Why is May 27th important? Well, if you go back to the beginning of this interview, what was the day of the first video being published? May 19th. That's 8 days before these pings were made available. How did the supposed hoaxer know where to put the plane in the exact location where it turns into the South Indian Ocean 8 days before the raw data was even available? Even the experts didn't know where the plane was. Most people were thinking that it went right over Indonesia. And then they get these pings, and that's when they decide that it went up and around Indonesia to our location. To me, that's absolute proof the videos are real. I mean, there's just they just randomly guessed a location that turned out to be the real location where the plane turned into the South Indian Ocean.
Well, not to mention the fact a high school kid could manipulate this database. I mean,
that's what I said. It'd take me half a day, and I could insert 10 rows into this Excel spreadsheet. And now the plane's going into the South Indian Ocean as opposed to wherever else it went. This is it, 10 rows on the spreadsheet. And I look at this and I go, and I'm looking through all the stuff before this. It blew me away when I got to this part. I was like, how does anybody who knows how databases work not look at this and go, big red flags? Like, I work in databases all the time. Relational databases are just spreadsheets stacked on top of each other that connect to one another.
Right.
To me, this stuck out like a sore thumb. I started questioning all the independent group about this all over Twitter, started calling them out on it. And their explanations make no sense. They claim that ACARS was turned off at 1707 and that somehow that explains this. Well, the data stops at 1840, not at 1707. Well, why is this changed right here at this time? And you know what their answer usually is? Just yelling at me going, it's normal. It's normal. Anytime people do that to me, I know they're either full of crap or they're...
You're an actual expert at this. I'm not an expert. I know how to do this. It's like, you know,
this is the one thing that I am actually an expert on is databases and stuff like
you're
that.
Actually an expert at this. I know.
So I was looking at that. I mean, I can't believe it. So this is what I tell people too, is that the only thing we have to throw out is that data of it going to the South Indian Ocean. And not only do we have these sketchy pings, We searched in the most extensive search in history, above and below water. They found nothing where those pings indicate the plane would have crashed. Nothing at all. In fact, there was a scientific report that was just published beginning of May by Cardiff University. They looked at the acoustic data. So I've been talking about since last year that there was no acoustic pings consistent with a plane crashing in the ocean. Well, Cardiff University came out and proved me right. They posted the data. They looked at the hydroacoustic system. One is in Western Australia. Another one's in Diego Garcia. And they proved that they both should have been able to hear any plane crashing into the ocean. There's no acoustic signals consistent with anywhere along the entire route of the plane. There's one acoustic signal almost an hour after the plane already ran out of fuel on only one of the two acoustic systems. This can't be the plane crashing. So it's like we have the actual scientific proof that this plane couldn't have crashed in the South Indian Ocean. They're about to go do another search. Ocean Infinity is. They've already done 2 failed searches. They did another one in 2018 that found nothing. They're going to do a third search. It's going to find nothing again because they're just not even searching in the right area down there. The plane didn't crash in the South Indian Ocean. Planes don't crash without leaving massive debris fields.
Right.
If the plane crashed in the ocean, we would have seen it the next day. Like, I don't know. The crazy part is you don't have to be any kind of expert. Just basic common logic and critical thinking.
No, I know.
Would have figured this out.
Yeah. Yeah. So your theory is that these 3 orbs created a wormhole and this plane flew through it, right? And came out on the west side and then flew to Diego Garcia. Is that your theory?
That's what I think the evidence shows, and it's hard. It's crazy to even say that out loud that we have. But then you look at the scientific papers and you go, well, why are these people writing about wormholes and teleportation and physics studies and they're all connected to the government? And why was the government covering this up? So I think the point you were asking before is like, what's the connection between the fire and the videos?
Yeah, right.
And to me, there's 2 plausible options. One is the fire was accidental. And the orbs or whatever you see here is a rescue operation.
Right.
This plane is doomed. It couldn't land in Penang. Why ever it couldn't land in Penang, this plane lands in the ocean. That's gonna be the end for everybody.
Right.
The other side of it is, okay, the whole thing was a planned operation. Maybe the reason why it goes dark at that point is that's a weak point between radars. That's the best time to trigger your operation.
That's the craziest thing about this whole mystery is that it went dark at exactly the right time where you want to screw with things up.
And this is not some random hijackers with box cutters pulling this off.
No.
This is a high-tech hijacking event. This is a high-tech operation that we're talking about here. So in that case, you can really rule it down to just one of 3 countries: Russia, China, and the United States of America.
Yeah.
Now, there was a China Times only reported Mayday call of the plane disintegrating and attempting an emergency landing. The time of this was 2:43 a.m. Why is that time important? Because if you convert that to UTC time from Malaysian local time, that's 1843 UTC. That's within 5 minutes of the plane being in the Nicobar Islands at that location indicated by the coordinates in the satellite video. So we've got Catherine T seeing the plane on fire. We've got 2 videos with smoke coming out of the back of the plane, flying low, descending. And we've got a Mayday call that was supposedly intercepted from the United States military. That is of the plane supposedly attempting an emergency landing in the ocean, ditching the plane, and disintegrating, from Chinese, presumably on fire, right? We got 3 sources of corroboration for what we're seeing in these videos right here. And who does that implicate? It implicates the United States government. Here's another fun fact that I talk about frequently, but not that much.
Before you go on, you're talking about China, Russia, and the U.S.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me? I don't think Russia has the technology to do any of this shit.
I think we surpassed them when the Soviet Union fell, for sure. Yeah, they might have figured it out before then. Like Thomas Bearden talks about them being advanced like in the 80s. But I think once the Soviet Union fell, we just leapfrogged them.
Right.
China, I think, is catching up quickly. They know because the biggest piece of technology that is used in this to create this type of advanced technology is semiconductors, superconductivity. And if you look, we just put new tariffs on China for semiconductors because we know that's the next battlefield for this advanced technology. And China is investing, I think, $160 billion in their semiconductor industry. So plasma physics and semiconductors are the reason why you do this. China is not the one that pulled this off. And we know that because they hacked the Malaysian government the next day. They used this social engineering hack
Yeah.
where they said, click on this, we found some debris. And some dude in Malaysia in the Ministry of Transportation clicked on a link and they got hacked, and they stole crisis meeting minute notes about MH370 and classified information about the plane. What's classified about the plane? And the day after the plane disappears, they're looking to figure out what happened, because they've got satellites in the sky too, and they're not idiots. They're going to go, there's no giant debris field anywhere. Where'd this plane go?
Right.
You know, so this rules China out. In fact, China leaked some satellite images to the internet on March 13th, 2014, 5 days after the plane disappeared. If you go look at those, they get reported on as debris in the ocean. Never found any debris, at least not in the ocean. If you go look at those images right now or Google them, it looks like something in a triangle formation around another object in the sky. And I'm going, holy shit, is it possible? Is it possible that this was the best imagery they got of what we did to the plane? So who's left? The United States government. Whose Mayday call was intercepted? United States government. Who could have this technology? United States government, right? Who's writing all the scientific papers about wormholes and teleportation and 0-point energy? United States government is, you know, and this is my government. You know, it's like, I don't like to expose my own government, because the truth is, I think this technology is extremely dangerous, but we stole this plane. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. In fact, I was just looking at a FOIA request by O'Reilly Tates. I don't know if you remember her. She was kind of pretty popular in right-wing circles in the early 2010s.
No, I don't.
She FOIA'd the National Security Agency, actually, like in April, right after. And she got rejected by the NSA that said that it was Obama era exemption to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy. And it's like, why would they be keeping that secret? So one other thing that I want to let you know here is that there was 20 engineers on board this plane from.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I knew that. Yeah.
So a lot of people caught on to this. Joseph P. Farrell as well. He did a whole interview where he basically pieced together the whole story without these videos. I don't know how he did that. The thing he couldn't figure out is, why would they teleport a plane when you could just blow it up? There's so much easier ways to do it. Well, he also said the answer is a show of force. So not only is this some type of counter espionage, like these people probably had information about this technology, and 8 of them were Chinese nationals of these 20 people. So the number one source of intellectual property theft in the United States is foreign nationals that work for American companies. Yeah. Freescale Semiconductor is an American company with connections to U.S. aerospace and defense, making microchips that were smaller than a dimple in a golf ball, like, you know, the size of like my nail here.
Yeah.
You know? And so this is the type of technology that enables what you see with the orbs, and how you can create the type of gravitational effects that we see with the orbs as well.
All right. So I want to get back to just some brass tacks here. So if the plane goes through the wormhole portal and comes out north of Diego Garcia, do you think the pilots know what's going on?
So that's the part that's hard. It's like, what happened to the passengers? Are they alive? Did the pilots know? Really, the United States government's the only one who knows for sure, you know. And I'm happy to speculate and give my opinion, but I like to tell people I'm not psychic, right? Like, I can't.
Please do. You go ahead, speculate. And
it's hard to say. Like the evidence for the pilot knowing is that the pilot in his simulator, which they looked at, had a waypoint for Diego Garcia, which is weird because you can't land commercial aircrafts at Diego Garcia, completely restricted airspace.
Right.
So you could argue that he was brought in to know ahead of time. And it also kind of goes back.
There's another thing too. If you're actually flying the plane through a wormhole and coming out on another place, the airspeed, wind, weather is going to be completely different. So unless you're prepared for that, you could you could crash the plane just there, couldn't you?
I think so, yeah. And that's what's crazy about it, is like, maybe it was also being remote controlled. So like Field McConnell and Captain Dan Hanley, they've been promoting this idea of Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, where the United States would have the ability to remote control an aircraft, which I mean, if I believe in wormhose, I have no problem believing in remote controlling an aircraft, you know?
I think that's simple.
So I think it's certainly possible. In fact, the French father, Guillaume Watrellos, he lost his wife and I think at least one child, maybe 2 children in the thing. He was told, and so was Florence Tachangi, that there was 2 American AWACS in the area, which are these radar planes with these big radar dishes on them, spy planes, and that the United States government knows exactly what happened to the plane. So you could argue that those planes could remote control the aircraft. They could jam the aircraft as well, potentially. If the fire didn't completely disable the plane, the aircrafts could have been jamming the plane as well. So it's hard to say exactly. If people did survive, then they would basically become wards of the state of the United States government. So we would either send them back to China under some agreement with China that they would never be able to speak in the public again. I don't think we would really do that, honestly. I don't necessarily think we would just execute them, but if you want to think of like the dark scenarios, you might like say, here, drink this water bottle, and then you like go to sleep and you don't wake up again.
Right.
Alternatively, you could live out the rest of your days on Diego Garcia Island. Seems beautiful. I wouldn't mind it probably. And then the last option is witness protection. So like the American Philip Wood, his girlfriend, Sarah, she went on CNN and all the major news stations and constantly would say that she thinks this plane was abducted, that somebody took this plane. The families knew that the stories and narratives that were being sold in the public were bullshit, because you don't have this level of suppression and obfuscation if you don't have anything to hide.
Well, hold it. Let's go back to the actual the lithium battery setting on fire. Okay, plane turns around. It's flying back. It's back over Malaysia, right?
Yep.
Do you think that, and you were talking about the fact it was flying really low to increase the oxygen in the cabin.
Yep.
Do you think there's a possibility that fire alone killed everybody on board?
100%. If you've been following the news, just a couple weeks ago, there was a lithium-ion battery fire in South Korea in one of these manufacturing plants. Killed 23 people. You guys can check the news articles about this. And I was like, how did it kill so many people? Because there's video of the guy fighting the thing as it's igniting. So you're like, how did they not get away? Turns out, after just 1 or 2 inhalations of this smoke, that's it. You're out.
Right.
That's all it takes.
Right.
So you can imagine if there's this toxic lithium-ion battery smoke billowing, from the forward cargo bay through the air conditioning system, you might not even realize, but it might start to get hazy in the plane, and you've got your oxygen mask on, and maybe it's not working that well, or it only works for like 15 or 20 minutes. And then it's just, you go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then you don't wake up. You could even imagine that like maybe the operation didn't go exactly as planned, and maybe people died when they didn't want them to die. And now it's an awkward situation, right? Where we accidentally just killed a bunch of people.
Right.
So I don't know the truth.
Of the two scenarios, whether this was a rescue operation after this fire started, or whether the whole thing was planned ahead of time, which one do you lean toward?
I now lean towards planned, like pretty heavily towards planned. There was a letter that got posted on a YouTube channel that was brand new. That was called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. I still, even when I say it, my hair on my arm raises. It's an 11-minute long letter. Yeah, to me.
Yeah.
On a channel that like gets buffered by a couple of crappy videos like on either side, and then it's got this super highly produced AI voice video that's an 11-minute long video that talks about the case like very close to the evidence that I put out there, adds in details and times that are completely things that I would never have known, like when the plane was received, either at Diego Garcia or somewhere else. Talks about how the technology works, and that basically if any two warring factions in the country or the world got access to this technology, the planet would be destroyed. And I'm just sitting there listening to it going like, I can't find the lie, right? This is super weird. Like, and the more time that goes on, the more credibility I give this video, because I thought, well, maybe somebody made this video because they're going to try to boost their own popularity based on my research or what.
Or to fuck you up. Right.
Yeah. Or to mess me up. And so I was very cautious about reporting on it at first, but I figured it's too crazy not to put out there.
Yeah.
And I've listened to it like 50 times. I didn't make the thing. It tries to get me to find Randall Carlson and talk about sacred geometry, because presumably a lot of this technology is based on very simple shapes. It's like there's elegance and simplicity regarding some of this stuff. And it made me think of like a toroid, which is what you need in order to confine your magnetic field, which I think there's a connection there to anti-gravity as well. But that letter talked about the idea that these were defectors that were going to China. And I had thought that was a possibility, but it seemed like too complicated. But then the way they put it together, I go, God, I mean, it just makes more sense, because it brings in all these other different aspects of like why China was, they even talk about the Chinese satellite images as well in that letter to me. And I'm going, I'm the only one on the planet who speculated that could be spycraft, that they were leaking those images as like a message that like we saw what you did. Because I thought the only reason why you would teleport a plane is that you're trying to hide the plane. But the letter to me says this was like a who's your daddy
Yeah,
situation.
right.
Like this is us saying like they didn't want these videos to leak, but they wanted China to know we can disappear an aircraft. And by the way, our propaganda apparatus is so strong that nobody will ever know. And if you go try to tell anybody, that our all Western media will come out and say, well, this has all the hallmarks of Chinese disinformation, right? No one's going to believe that we teleported a plane. So good luck if you want to say that, you know? It's kind of like the movie The Dark Knight. It's like your boss, you think your boss is like, you know, Batman and he's whatever, some kind of vigilante. And you know, you want to go and you want to tell the world, good luck, right? It's like that same kind of situation. Like, you're never going to work.
Right.
So yeah, I lean towards that. Although the crazy part about the letter is that before that letter, I lean towards it being a rescue operation. And that's, if you look at all my podcasts, this is part of the reason why I've tried to stream everything I do in terms of the investigation to when I went on podcasts, just like show whatever my true opinion was, so that if people looked at it historically over time, you would be able to see the evolution of the investigation, of the evidence, and of my own belief in terms of what happened to the plane. And I think that brings even more credibility to the case.
All right, I have a question here, but we're going to launch into a whole big thing here. So I asked you before about what you thought was the timeline of the evolution of this technology. Now, this is what I have figured out after studying this for 50 freaking years. I'm really old. I don't know if you know that. So it appears the best that I've been able to come up with is that the U.S. Army or the military cracked gravity around 1958. Now, I have a hard time believing this, but this is what I should tell you too. I don't have any contacts myself personally at the Pentagon, but I know a lot of people who do. I talked to several reporters who talk to people in the Pentagon on a regular basis. And they've also said what you were talking about. There's been a huge struggle in the Pentagon for years about whether this information should be released. It's apparently like people are really at each other's throats about, it's two factions and they're warring. And they've been warring for a long time, apparently. And you don't blame them. I mean, people aren't all evil, you know? It's like, you know, not to mention, I don't know if that's evil or not.
Well, so real quick, because I want to add in there that, like, you have to realize that I don't think people are inherently evil. I just think that everybody has their own opinion for what's the safest. Like, I'm under the impression from my contacts that I've talked to that even the white hats, the good guys, some of them don't even want this information out because they really think that we're going to destroy ourselves. And that's the conclusion that I keep coming back to, is that we will destroy ourselves with this technology. So people say, well, why are you revealing it? And I say, well, because I think we should have agency over what happens to the course of our civilization.
And you're absolutely correct. That's absolutely true. That's what I understand too. That a lot of the white hat people, even they, you know, some of them don't want this. And it's not even just that reason. It's just some people think that the public can't handle it. You know, there's all sorts of reasons. So you got a whole bunch of people with a bunch of different opinions, and you know they're battling back and forth. You know, so the best information I have is that we cracked the gravity thing in 1958. We were basically flying large, for lack of a better term, UFOs by 1980-81. Now, I have to tell you, I've seen one of those giant triangular UFOs. I saw one up close, which was really weird. But if you look, you know, supposedly they were flying with 300 people in 1981. My only problem with this is that for all practical purposes, we didn't have any real computer technology in 1981. I mean, we did, but it's hard to believe you could control an anti-gravity spacecraft without high-end computers. And supposedly they were doing that. I don't know if you have any opinion on that or whatever. You know, I mean, I go back. I was a computer programmer in the 1990s, so it's like we didn't have shit.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with computers going from no computers to the earliest computers to where we're at now. It's funny you mentioned that because I was just making a note that I forgot something as well, is that I think that the teleportation stuff and what we see in the MH370 videos took off in the early 2000s, not just because of the scientific papers, but what else happened? Quantum computers.
Yes.
People still don't even know, like, what is the point of a quantum? We're building these quantum computers, and then we know the military is like decades ahead of the public. So what are they using this for? And then when you look at the orbs spiraling around the plane, there's nobody inside these orbs. There's not like little people
No.
flying. Like the movements are too exact. It's a perfect sinusoidal pattern. I think that it would require supercomputers or quantum computers. And generally, quantum computers, the benefit is their computing power increases exponentially. Every
Right.
qubit you add, it increases the power by a factor of 2.
Right.
And so very quickly you get to points where like you can do crazy advanced stuff. Like with these 5,000 qubit supercomputers, we're already starting to achieve magical type stuff. I think the military does have applications for these quantum computers. And I think that one of them is controlling these orbs and stuff like this to be able to do what we see in those videos and teleport an aircraft. So I don't know about like in the 80s. That's where I kind of have like a blur in terms of like how do you manipulate anti-gravity without powerful supercomputers.
I don't
And
either.
there's some people that argue you can do it with consciousness, which I think is maybe not. Just I have to see it to believe it.
In the future, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I saw my triangular spacecraft around 2016. So the mastered the science, but as far as the computing power to actually fly something like that, I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, one other thing I'll say too is that I know that politicians know about these videos and that they know about the science. I won't go into too much depth, but I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that they're aware. And one of the things that bugged me about this whole case, even for the last year, is how silent like some of the politicians have been. I wrote a letter to Congress that had almost 7 million views on Twitter that I mailed to a bunch of congressmen, including all the congressmen on the UAP caucus, several senators as well. They're in the gang of 8. I mailed it to all them. Nobody ever got back to me, which is like, this is like verifiable information. I even have the name of the leaker of the videos being like, all you have to do is find this guy and talk to him and be like, were you the guy that went to prison for leaking these videos? We can confirm they're real, but nobody got back to me.
Shall I assume you've never made his name public?
No, I have. Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lin. You got anyone out there can go look up this guy's case back in 2014, 2015. They wouldn't release him. They wouldn't. They kept him in pretrial detainment. They wouldn't say what it was that he leaked to the public. The government was afraid of going to court because they were afraid they would have to reveal what the classified information was that he leaked. They tried to get him as a spy for espionage and ended up having to admit that there was no evidence that he exchanged any information with anyone from China. This defense lawyer argued that the classified information in question was available on the internet. What? That he flew spy planes like the AWACS that we were talking about. Like he probably was there that night. His position was a position where he literally would have had access to both videos. And he got caught with flight manifests that includes search and rescue code names in May of 2014.
Well, I would consider that alone proof that the videos are real.
To me, it is too. And here's more. He got assigned to that squadron, this super secret spy plane squadron called the VPU-2 Wizards, February 2014, right before the plane disappears. His lawyer has a quote saying that the investigation into him began April 2nd, 2014. I mean, your window of time is like, there's MH370 disappear. This is the time. To me, like that's just this guy. He's the guy that leaked the videos.
Is he still in? Is he in prison right now?
No, he got out like 2021, but he took a plea deal. So presumably he could never talk about what happened or he'd go back to prison. Also, he might just literally be afraid of being killed. Wouldn't surprise me. And that's the reason why I haven't tried to track him down for the most part. But he never came out, never called me, told me to stop saying his name. I've said his name hundreds of times, almost every single podcast. And you would think if he's not the guy, he would have said, hey, you should stop saying my name, claiming I'm the guy that leaked these videos. And also, I think that they kind of brainwashed him a little bit. Like, if you look through his case, you'll find out that he was like abused, and they were like, beating him up and putting him out in the cold and doing the kinds of things that you do to people who are in detainment. And that they made him like issue a statement saying that he was like spiritually broken and that, he should stand as a warning for other people not to do what he did. I mean, this was a guy that by all accounts was a patriot. We trusted him with nuclear weapons. He was like on a fast track towards like upper management, basically, so to speak, in the military. I think he was like had some kind of connection to like Congress as well, where he was like serving as some kind of liaison. In fact, there's arguments that he was like actually a spy for us against China as well, because he had some pre-existing relationship with the NCIS and the FBI. They actually get cut off. They give him a 9-year sentence after a plea deal for a non-espionage case, which is way, way, way more than what people get for dissemination of classified information. People have been convicted of espionage and only got a couple of years.
Yeah, right.
And so he gets 9 years. They shaved off 3 years because he worked with the NCIS and the FBI. And presumably they were working with him to figure out, like, who did you give these videos to that they got onto the internet?
Have you ever figured out or have any speculation on why he did this?
I think you can kind of piece together from the dates of the videos that we were talking about at the beginning of this interview. Like, it says received March 12th, 2014. That indicates somebody had an emotional reaction, right? Whatever they saw, they got it out right away. You can imagine how hot those videos would be, right? You don't want to be sitting on those videos. Somebody had an emotional reaction. And then the second video gets out there because we ignore the first video. The second video leaks like 2 weeks after the first video was published. So you can build this time frame. Now, the first video is called Satellite Video, Airliner, and UFOs. So it's possible the person who was looking at that didn't even know that was our technology. Right? They're looking at this. You're watching that in real time. You have no idea about UFOs or any of this stuff. And you go, holy shit. I just watched some orbs disappear a plane. And you know the videos are real because you're logged into the spy satellite database, right?
Yeah.
I think that Edward C. Lin had an emotional reaction, realized that nobody was going to know the truth about the plane, thought he would be a hero by leaking these videos to the world. And instead, he finds out the hard way that the United States government controls all the world's media and that they were not going to let any media ever report on those videos. And to date, no media ever did report on those videos. Even now, after I've gotten over probably about 1 billion views on this case between all the podcasts I've done, maybe even more than 1 billion. And no media, mainstream media, has ever reached out to me, not once, to talk to me, which is pretty weird. I've gone on over 100 podcasts probably.
It is pretty weird. It's really
mainstream
weird.
Media will not talk at all. They're talking about that kid in Vegas whose family saw aliens or whatever in their backyard.
Yeah, right.
But they won't talk to a guy who's like, hey, I've solved MH370. I've got a mountain of evidence, including 2 perfectly in sync military videos of the plane disappearing out of the sky with coordinates in them. It's like, nope, we don't want to talk about that. So, sorry, I got a little off track there, but I think that he probably had an emotional reaction. He had Taiwanese contacts. So I wouldn't surprise me if he leaked these to one of his Taiwanese contacts and then they put them onto the internet. And then Edward C. Lin is now totally screwed because he leaked them because he did have this history of like talking a little bit too much. So it kind of makes me think that he freaked out, saw that, sent that to somebody, and then somebody had to convince Regicide Anon, this YouTuber, they're like, hey, this is a real military footage. Because a lot of people look at the satellite video and they don't even know we have satellite video. They don't realize that satellite video isn't just looking straight down anymore. They don't realize that satellite video isn't even looking through satellites anymore. Like, we only have 5 optical satellites in the sky still right now. Most of our satellites are based off of SIBRs, which is a constellation of satellites constantly scanning the globe and then beaming that information down in infrared to ground-based computers that are building like a 3-dimensional visualization, just like Google Earth. In fact, Google Earth is literally linked to the military potentially with this type of capability. We found documentation that supports that as well. So you can imagine that they would have to convince them, hey, these are real satellite videos. And so maybe that's the reason why the delay between the March 12th date and the upload date of May 19th, that they're convincing them. Because also Regicide Anon's description says source protected in it, which is like, Regicide Anon was some random YouTube UFO uploader, which most of the videos that they publish look fake. But then you look at these videos and you go, whoa, these are like a different caliber of videos than all the others.
Yeah.
In fact, somebody else uploaded the videos because several months later, these videos started getting published on other channels. And most of them were Spanish-speaking channels. And one of them says that Regicide Anon like argued for the veracity of the videos with the other users because the other users thought they must be fake. Just like right now, where a bunch of people think they must be fake because people don't realize what real videos look like in terms of like this. So it's like, why would Regicide Anon be arguing for these videos being real, unless they were sure they were real? In fact, we said the video was published May 19th, 2014. 3 days later, Regicide Anon makes a Twitter account. It says, my first tweet. We found the post. They're actually still up even now. And you guys can find them if you want to check. So March 22nd, they say, my first tweet. Same day, they say, watch this video before it gets deleted. And they have a link to the satellite video.
Huh.
Whoa, that's pretty damn weird. And then when the second video gets posted, it says, second video just released, different what did they say, like different angle or different perspective than first from a drone video or UAV, I think they say. And you're like, man, this is like, if this is a hoax, this is a pretty elaborate hoax that's being pulled right here, right? So
Yeah.
to me, these videos represent catastrophic disclosure. Is that, like we were saying before, not even the white hats want this much information out, because I think even the people that are like the Jeremy Corbells of the world or whatever, or the James Foxes, the Ross Coulharts, these guys want disclosure. Let's say the Christopher Mellons. I think that all of these guys are kind of in the same camp. They don't want UFO disclosure to happen while also exposing a major conspiracy that the United States government perpetuated on a civilian airliner.
Yeah.
And there's like, people would actually be very upset. Do I think there'd be consequences? No. I think that the people that we're talking about are above the law, and
Right.
that nobody would face any real consequences for this, but it would look really bad from a political perspective.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's why I think they can't allow this. They want UFO disclosure to come out, just not like this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
And then I
Mellon
come
actually,
along and I'm a random guy who had nothing to do with all this.
Right.
And I'm going, yeah. So anyway, I got the craziest videos ever here that I want people to see.
and they probably just are okay with you talking, because it's like, you're just talking, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the secret of that is what I've learned from talking to people behind the scenes or what have you as well, is that as long as you're just talking about the theory and stuff like that, it's fine. It's when you start to show people how to engineer it that you start, that's where like you don't want to be careful when you get in your car kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
Or walking across the
Well,
street.
that was actually, I need to wrap this up here, but that was my last question for you. Have you found yourself in any physical danger or social danger or anything?
I mean, I think that they've
And if you-
definitely sent
if you don't
all
want-
of the disinformation apparatus directly targeted at me. People always message like, I don't know how your mental fortitude puts up with all this, because I have people they dug through my whole history online, found every possible thing they could find to take out of context to use against me and post against me online. They had people watching every single live stream I've done to clip anything that I say out of context to use to attack me. This is not things that happen organically. And in fact, we proved that there was people inorganically coordinating disinformation about me. They got caught talking about it in spaces and stuff like that as well, which is like, yeah, I mean, I kind of expected that. That's when I got into it. But like, I just want people to realize that's absolutely happening.
Right.
I've also been told through back channels that I'm being watched at this point by, I don't know, the black hats, white hats. I'm not sure. I'm probably both. And I've been told by several people that like, the people in the know about this have been watching my investigation, some of them rooting for it. Because I don't think that anybody expected something like this to happen, where somebody completely out of nowhere just starts putting the puzzle pieces together like this. And I think some people are look up to me for being able to pull that off, and some people are probably threatened by that, would be my guess. And so I have been a little bit more careful, because truth is, like, I feel like I've pretty much figured out that like anti-gravity or gravity manipulation is possible, free energy is possible, and have seen some ways to really pull it off. And so I've pulled back a little bit from disclosing some of that, because also I'm conflicted in terms of like, I really don't want like North Korea and Iran to know about some of this stuff. They can be watching me just like anybody else can,
Right.
And I, at the end of the day, like I go think about this Bob Lazar quote where he was on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan asked him like, hey, if you could do it all over again, would you? And you would expect him to say yes, but he goes, no. He goes, no, I got to work with magical technology. I would not do this all over again. Truth is, if I got to work with magical technology, I probably wouldn't do this either. I mean, it's such a pain trying to convince people. I don't even really want to do it anymore. I think the people that know, they kind of know and they can figure it out. And I've left enough clues for people to figure it out at this point. But I've also just kind of come to the conclusion that most people were not really ready for this and not really ready for this technology. So if I got to work on it, if I got to be one of those 500 to 2,000 people that worked on it, I probably would. I probably would just like give up all this stuff and just go work on it, because it's cool, man. I want to work on Star Trek technology. It's awesome.
Right. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. And I'm sorry if that maybe I shouldn't use that term, because in the fact that we kind of ended on a downer there, but
Well, it's a fun conversation. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think that it's, this is one of the last interviews that I think I'm going to do for a little while now, because I just kind of want to lay low a little bit and, enjoy being a normal person for a while. And it's just been a lot to do this, but I love having conversations like this with people who are open-minded, who you have background and knowledge on like some of this stuff, where it's like, we can kind of bounce ideas back and forth. I love the whole conversation about like, when do you think they figured this out? Because that's one of the things that I keep thinking about back in my mind is like, okay, we figured this out, but like when and how long have we been hiding this? And then there's other questions too that I hope a lot of people that are watching are thinking about, which is like, where does this come from? And what does this mean about the nature of our civilization? And those are some of the bigger questions that I don't broach on that much, but I do think about. And it's because I don't know for sure. The more I learn, the less I know.
It's terrible, isn't it? That's right. I know.
It's scary
I
though.
know. I'm the stupidest guy on earth on this at this point. It's awful. Ashton, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I don't know if we'll do this again. I hope we do. But either way, thank you for joining
Awesome.
us.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Jim.
it. Okay, I said we weren't coming back, but here I am. I'm back. So I want to thank Ashton Forbes. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Now, usually when we run pre-recorded video interviews, I don't bother to watch. I got other stuff going on here. I set a timer so I can, and I keep the screen on so that I make sure the video doesn't. It did hiccup there toward the end there just a little bit, but yeah, but he said that he was talking about Bob Lazar, that someone asked Bob, well, Joe Rogan asked Bob if he could do it all over again, would he? And Lazar said no. And Ashton was talking about the people that have been bugging him. I do this because I want you folks to realize that there's a whole bunch more going on the planet and the world than you might be aware of. And yes, some of the people, I mean, I'm gonna, this is really true. I don't think this is true in this case, but some of the people I have on this show are end up going to be charlatans and liars. But the thing is, I figure you still gotta hear all of it. That's what I look at my role here, is to bring these people to light so that you can hear what they have to say. And even with callers, like last night, all the callers we had, it was really interesting. We had 2 black men who called in, and I hate to do this, but if I'm going to stereotype, I'm pretty certain they weren't lying because of their accents. And they were basically, they had differing points of view on reparations. They were disagreeing with each other. So, I mean, that was pretty fascinating too. You get to hear 2 sides of it. Anyway, thanks to Ashton. I want to thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow night, Jonathan Tobin, he's the executive editor of the Jewish News Service in the United States, in the U.S. I think if you want to see it, I think it's at jns.org or jns.us. I can't remember if you want to look at that. He's going to be on. We'll talk about Netanyahu's speech this afternoon, and we'll also talk about Biden's speech to the nation tonight and whatever else comes up. There's not enough time. It's unbelievable. We do this show 4 nights a week. The show is, when we started, it was about 90 minutes. Now we're starting to push 2 hours, and there's still not enough time. I don't know how to handle it. I have there's been some ideas floating around about syndicating this show to radio, but sometimes I wonder how the hell are we going to do it on the radio? We'll run out of time there too. Who knows? Anyway. Thanks to Ashton. Thanks to you for watching. I'm Jim Peters. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.